All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. So the Las Vegas Raiders still need a quarterback, right? Jimmy Garoppolo will eventually be cut. They're going to save a bunch of money, and we're hearing, with the 13th pick, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, a trade up for Jayden Daniels due to his linkage with head coach Antonio Pierce. But one thing is for certain, the Las Vegas Raiders roster, offense, defense, it's a lot better than people are thinking. It's a lot better than even some Raiders fans are thinking. Folks, the Raiders won 8 football games last season. They averaged less than 200 yards per game the entire season. They only had like 4 games where they scored more than 20 points. They went through a full half season, a full year and a half with head coach Josh McDaniels, who just obliterated the Raiders offense, in my opinion. Antonio Pierce, the interim head coach, comes on in, promotes 4th round rookie quarterback, 3rd string quarterback at that time, Aiden O'Connell. And they take down the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day, but then there were some blunders like the 0-point game to the Minnesota Vikings. So one thing is for certain, in my opinion, Aiden O'Connell is not the in-pen starter for week 1 for the Las Vegas Raiders. Whether they draft at 13, whether they trade up for Heisman winner Jayden Daniels, which I think would just change everything, the Raiders are a playoff team, and they have a playoff roster, but they still just need the quarterback. They got Luke Getsy as the offensive coordinator. They got Tom Telesco as the GM. You just need the quarterback. And I say that like it's an easy thing. You have franchises that still have yet to find their franchise QB. So today we're talking about the Raiders quarterback search. We're going to talk about Russ. We're going to talk about Jayden Daniels, a couple of more rookies, and then we're going to talk about some other holes in the Raiders roster. But before we do, if you guys enjoy it, hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily Raiders content. Raiders fans, love you guys so much. Try and get this video to 250 likes. That would mean the absolute world to me. So I saw a, Bleacher Report dropped like a best and worst case scenario for every team that needs a quarterback. And, the Raiders' worst case was do nothing. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But their best case was Russell Wilson. And this is an idea that, I've seen some type of linkage with Russell Wilson and the Raiders because the Raiders were actually on Russ's want list back in 2021 before he ultimately ended up going to the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson's interesting because he is a little bit on the older side, but you could argue this. Here's a quote from Jeremy Fowler with ESPN. The Raiders need a vet. They are one of Wilson's original teams he wanted to go to. He'd stay in the AFC West, the West Coast. Wilson's wife could do a Vegas residency as a live performer, et cetera, et cetera. Neither here nor there. Russell Wilson to the Raiders wouldn't be my favorite scenario, but it also wouldn't be my worst scenario. Russ is a player who is doing a really, really good job at game managing, actually. He had a really solid season. It's just the one thing with him is the big playability isn't really there at this point in his career. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's closer to 40 than he is 30. You're only going to get like 2 or 3 big-time plays from Russell Wilson. But once again, we revert back to like the fact of, this roster is ready to win. I've got Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow probably on their ways out, but Russell Wilson he did a really good job this past season, 9-time Pro Bowler. Did a really good job at not turning the ball over, and that's going to win you football games, and that's going to ultimately win you playoff games. But he threw 66.4% completion percentage, a little over 3,000 yards, nothing too crazy there. But he did have 26 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions. Once again, though, my only issue if the Raiders were to go with a Kirk Cousins or a Russell Wilson, or not even Kirk Cousins, but more of a Russell Wilson or a Ryan Tannehill, is that big play isn't really there. And that's why Jayden Daniels entices me so much. It's just the thing is, man, you're probably going to have to trade up and get him. And I will say, take that with a grain of salt, because in my opinion, Jayden Daniels is the second best quarterback in this year's class. He reminds me actually a little bit of Anthony Richardson's evaluation from this time last season in the offseason, where you ask somebody, and Anthony Richardson was like a 2nd or 3rd round QB. He ended up going in the top 10. He's gonna be, he got injured, but he's gonna be a really talented QB. It's just the thing that from the Raiders standpoint, if Jayden Daniels is actually picked 2 or 3, which by the way, like I said, take it with a grain of salt, because I'm seeing a lot of skepticism from Jayden Daniels, not only in the Raiders community, but in the NFL community alike. Like, people are concerned with Jayden Daniels, especially his size. That's not a concern for me. He's got that big pop, he's got that big playability. And we've been preaching this on this Raiders channel recently. Like, I want to rain down fire on my opponents. I want my offense to become my defense. And the thing is, the Raiders defense is in a much better state than a lot of people are thinking. Like, they were a top 10 defense this year in total, even with Josh McDaniels. I got Patrick Graham back. I've got Antonio Pierce, defensive minded head coach. Like, these guys love him. The Raiders were one of the best defenses in the NFL when Antonio Pierce was implemented as the interim head coach. But if the projections stay true to what they are right now, and you do have Jayden Daniels going pick number 2 or pick number 3, or at least in the top 5, you're going to have to give up a pretty big arm and a leg. You know, a good recent example of a team moving from the outside of the top 10 into the top 3 was San Francisco going for Trey Lance back in 2021. They dealt 4 overall picks to the Miami Dolphins, and there were 3 first rounders in there. So if Tom Telesco and this Raiders management staff, if when they evaluate Jayden Daniels and they see him as a true franchise QB, which I do, and the draft boards have him going 2 or 3, you're going to have to you're definitely giving up that 13th pick. You're probably going to have to give, an arm and a leg to trade up and get him. So it's a big risk. It's something that could set the Raiders organization back, but it also could catapult them. It could skyrocket them into a similar situation to, honestly, a much better situation to the Houston Texans last year with what they did with CJ Stroud. Like, Jayden Daniels, if he hits and the Raiders trade up to get him, even if they give up a couple of first round draft picks to acquire him, folks, everything changes. I mean, now you're going to have teams game planning and strategizing how to react to your offense. And that's just what I want the Raiders to do. I want them to be big. I want them to be bold. We've been talking about it the last couple of weeks. Like, fortune favors the bold. And I think the Raiders are in a position right now where they're just kind of sick of being this mediocre team. I want the Raiders to get back to what I know and love them to be. And I think Jayden Daniels would go a long way. Now, with that being said, if the Raiders do decide to go in a Kirk Cousins or a Russell Wilson route, I don't think that's the worst thing, especially because Aiden O'Connell does have a lot of potential in this league. I like what Aiden did. He went 5 of 5 as a full-time starter for the Las Vegas Raiders, but, the big-time plays were not really there. Anyways, I do think that the Raiders are going to just have a different quarterback other than Aiden O'Connell or Ryan Tannehill in the house, whether it's Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, Jayden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. I'm a big fan of any of those as opposed to the current QBs on the roster. So that's it for today. Let me know your thoughts on Jayden Daniels to the Las Vegas Raiders and Russell Wilson. But next time, we'll see you. And that's it for me. Hit that like button, hit that sub button. We'll see you guys soon.